Let's talk about replacement theology. What we know from early church writings up into the 4th century, the church was uniformly what we call premillennial. It took the Bible literally, and it accepted the fact that there would be a second coming, and with the second coming, there's going to be the establishment of a kingdom for 1,000 years. And of course, part of the prophecies about the kingdom is going to be the issue of Israel being restored to all of the promised land and also living in peace. That began to change with two key individuals, because the church began to break away from its Jewish roots. The church began to depart further and further from the Jewish frame of reference and was influenced more by Greek philosophy than typical Jewish understanding of the very books written by Jewish people themselves. And two key men would be responsible. The first man was Origen. Origen was heavily influenced by Greek philosophy, and he introduced the allegorical method of interpreting the Bible. He applied it to the Bible as a whole, including the historical segments. And what was important for Origen is not the obvious meaning of the text, but the hidden, deeper spiritual allegorical meaning. And obviously, to determine what that meant was pretty much subjective. You couldn't trust what the text said anymore. You simply took it as it was, as you felt it should be taken, not taken as it is written. Then came Augustine. And Augustine took those principles of Origen's interpretation and specifically applied it to Bible prophecy. And what he did was basically reject the premillennial concept. The Messiah comes before the kingdom, before the millennium, to establish the kingdom, to establish the millennium. But rather, there'll be no literal millennium on the earth. And the 1,000 years, he said, should be taken not literally, but allegorically. And it covers the period of time between the first and second coming of the Messiah. So essentially, we are now in the millennium. And what he said was we shouldn't try to interpret the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, in its own merit, in its own context. Rather, we should interpret the Old Testament by the New. And therefore, the New became the means of interpreting the Old. That would mean that something Isaiah wrote, say, about 700 BC, would not be understood for 7-8 centuries till the New Testament came along. And that really is hard to grasp, but that's what he began to teach. In addition, Jerusalem lost its status as the city of God. And when Augustine wrote his book, The City of God, he was referring to Rome. And he went on to teach that salvation comes only through the Roman Catholic Church. Rome is now the holy city. Now the question is, why did Origen and then Augustine make such radical changes that influenced the church for centuries? And as I mentioned, one issue is that they were imbued with Greek philosophical concepts. These are not to be taken literally, but allegorically. But there's something else a lot of people miss. That if you read what these men said about the Jewish people, they're quite anti-Semitic. And it got to the point they just couldn't accept the fact that when Messiah returns, he's going to bring the Jewish people back into land, give them all of the promised land, and fulfill those covenantal promises. That anti-Semitism influenced the whole change in their view of Scripture and in the view of the future. And so what these people said as the years continued is that the true Israel is the church. The church is Israel is the church, but they were selective just when Israel meant the church. When God said nice things about Israel, that's the church. When God said bad things about Israel, well, that's them Jews again. So it's a very convenient way to interpret Scripture, but it's a very inconsistent way. Because when God addresses the same people, he says, now I will punish you, in the future I will bless you. It is simply inconceivable that he's changing audiences. But that's what these people believed. And many that follow their tradition to this day still believe it. And sadly, replacement theology remains the dominant theology of the church. But replacement theology can only stand based on the assumption that while you interpret certain things literally like history, all prophecy needs to be interpreted allegorically. So you have to have two separate hermeneutics. But if you follow one hermeneutic, you always take the Bible literally no matter what it speaks on, unless the text tells us otherwise. If you follow that one hermeneutic, then you'll see God has a future yet to come. There will be a kingdom. There will be a restoration of Israel. And there is no replacement theology. So again, replacement theology is based upon an allegorical view of Scripture, whereas premillennialism and dispensational theology is based upon a consistent literal hermeneutic. And that is the way we should read the Bible. That's the same way we read all writings and all other scriptures outside of prophecy.